Friends, regarding refund of input tax credit, the GST law provides for refund of input tax credit accumulated only in two circumstances. One, when the outward supply is exported. Two, when the rate of tax on inward supply is more than the rate of tax on outward supply. Regarding this is called inverted duty structure. In fact, the second case is called inverted duty structure. Only in respect of inverted duty structure, refund can be claimed. Now there is a confusion, there is a hue and cry all over the country in respect of refund of input tax credit accumulated on account of rate of tax on inward supply of services being higher than the rate of tax on outward supply, whether goods or services. There is a general understanding, initially there was a general understanding that whether the inward supply be it goods or be it services, if the rate of tax is higher than the rate of tax on outward supply, it should be eligible for refund. Accordingly, the respective rule, that is rule 89, to be more precise 89 sub rule 5, that also provided for tax on inward supply of goods as well as services, both when higher than the rate of tax on outward supply, it would be eligible. Subsequently, with effect from June 2018, it was amended to provide that no, input tax credit accumulated on account of inward supply of goods only will qualify for refund and not on services. In fact, when we talk about this rule being amended subsequently, does it suffice to restrict my refund of input tax credit pertaining to input services? That has been a very bone of contention. Friends, this issue, when we examine, we find that this rule 89, to be more precise of rule 5, this rule 89 is under the provisions of section 54 by subsection 3. Now section 54 by 3, we need to see whether 54 by 3 restricts the credit. Section 54 by 3 says that refund of unutilized input tax credit can be claimed. Now this unutilized input tax credit can be claimed. This is stated or provided in section 54.3, but that proviso says that where the credit, this input tax credit refund can be claimed, cannot be claimed except where the credit is accumulated, where on account of rate of tax on inputs being higher than the rate of tax on output supplies. Now the confusion arises from here. There is one school of thought which says, and mostly obviously the departmental officers thought, departmental authorities, tax authorities thought, they say that when the section 54 by 3 proviso says that rate of tax on inputs being higher than the rate of tax on output supplies, so inputs being a specific word specifically defined to cover only goods, and vis-a-vis there is input service and as well as capital goods, so therefore the input tax credit refund can be allowed only in respect of inputs and not input services. That has been the argument by the revenue tax authorities. Now friends, when we look at 54 by 3, this has used two terms. One is inputs, one is output supplies. Now output supplies is again not defined anywhere in the act. Actually the whole scheme of input tax credit is based on two concepts. One is inward supply of goods and services, and other is outward supply of goods and services. And we know GST law, overall GST law has subsumed all the earlier central taxes on goods and services, major taxes on goods and services, including central excise, including service tax, where central taxes on goods and services, including state VAT, including CST, where state taxes on goods. So all these were subsumed into GST, and the propagation all along has been that GST will, under GST, both goods and services will be treated at par. Both will be eligible for input tax credit, both will be liable to GST without any discrimination. Now for the purpose of classification, for the purpose of time of supply, and for the restricted purpose of place of supply, etc., there has been some discrimination between goods and services. Otherwise the overall tax framework does not discriminate between goods and services. So whether it is a supply of goods and services or whether it is an input tax credit, both are treating goods and services both alike. Therefore, how can you say that this section 54 by 3 proviso, when it uses the term inputs and output supplies, it will only apply? This is one point is very clear, that this output supplies will cover both outward supply of goods as well as outward supply of services. There is no dispute on that fact. then how can the dispute be on the front that inputs he used here will restrict only to input goods and not input services? That has been the issue. And in fact, when we look at that and when we look at the entire GST law, when we read the entire scheme of law harmoniously, we interpret it, there cannot be any such discrimination, and section 54 by 3 does not make any specific prohibition in respect of refund of input tax credit accumulated on account of input services vis-a-vis input goods. And precisely this issue has been examined by the Gujarat High Court, and very recently of late Gujarat High Court has already delivered a judgment in favor of the assessees, stating in case of VKC footwear and others, there were I think 10 odd cases were clubbed together. In that case, Gujarat High Court has already ruled that yes, this rule 89.5, this particular formula, there is a formula given that in how to calculate the refund amount. There is a phrase used, net input tax credit, and the Gujarat High Court has said that this net input tax credit will include input tax credit accumulated on account of inputs and input services both. So this judgment from Gujarat High Court sets the issue to rest, but of course this is subject to litigation. Department may definitely go to higher forum, and therefore next issue is what should we all do. Of course, we have always been taking a view that it should be applicable to both goods and services, and accordingly we have been advising our clients as well to claim input tax credit refund on account of both inputs and input services without any restriction. Now, since the department has not been allowing the refund on account of services, and therefore they are rejecting the refund claim. But on the other hand, as soon as you file a refund claim on account of input services as well, the amount of refund claim is immediately deducted from your input tax credit ledger. So once that amount is deducted, you write to the department that you please, since you have already rejected my refund claim, so to that extent you refund my amount in my input tax credit ledger. And if they do not do so, or if they reject your contention, then in that case definitely you go for appeal. But since Gujarat High Court has already come in our favor, so being Gujarat High Court not being a jurisdictional High Court, of course, as long as there is no contradictory view from any other High Court, Gujarat High Court judgment should prevail. But nevertheless, it is advisable that we also should file a writ challenging the view taken or challenging the action of the department by rejecting my refund claim, and a writ may be filed in the High Court, and we can get an order from the jurisdictional High Court. Probably that would actually save us, that would actually be the advisable course of action. We should act accordingly. Thank you, friends.